But media and advertising, I think, is of particular interest, I would say, to a lot of people, probably in this room from a CNBC standpoint. But I'm so happy to have you both here. So Tyler did a great introduction, but I would love if you could tell the audience a little bit more about your companies, Mountain and Runway, and what you do. Mark, maybe we'll start with you.
OK. So Mountain is a 500-person company that's democratizing TV advertising by bringing this medium that was previously for the biggest corporations with big, expensive national ad campaigns and bringing it to small, mid-sized businesses. And so probably the key stat that affects everything we're doing in AI, 90% of our customers have never advertised on TV before. So literally every single day, Mountain and every streaming network, this is all in streaming television, every streaming network in America get new customers. They get new Mountain customers, and none of those customers have TV ads when we meet them. They don't have media teams. They don't have any of that. And so we leverage our platform and increasingly a lot of AI technology to make that possible.
Great. We'll dive into a little bit of that. Chris, tell us more about Runway.
Sure, absolutely. So Runway is a research company that builds and develops AI models, mostly aimed at media, filmmaking, and kind of creatives. We've been working on this for almost 6-7 years. And our focus really is making sure that we can provide the most accessible and controllable new frontier tools and models for people to make great movies.
You have a big deal with Lionsgate. That might be a good place to start as a tangible example of what could actually change and what Hollywood, at least, is doing. Can you tell us more about it?
Yeah, absolutely. So for the last couple of years, we've been working with a lot of studios and production companies and making sure we can learn from them, but also they can understand these new kind of like capabilities that AI models are able to offer, specifically when you're making films. And so with Lionsgate, we've been working on for quite some time. And we just announced a partnership that was last week that it's the first of its kind. It's basically a collaboration where we're training a custom AI model on the entirely catalog and all the videos that shows the films that Lionsgate has had for many years. And the goal for that is really to give them and their creatives and their studios, their professionals, better tools they can use to make new movies and new shows. And so very excited to see that that's one of the first, I would say, that many more of the ones that we will be announcing or sharing over time. But it's a great step forward in getting AI into the hands of more people in Hollywood.
And I want to talk about data for a second. Data in movies, for example, looks much different than data, maybe in advertising.
Yeah.
What do you think? I mean, what is the role of data in media when it comes to training those models? And what can you say about sort of the potential data that's out there, how it can be used to train these models? Maybe what's an advantage to companies and businesses in the room that might have that data but don't quite know what to do with it?
Yeah, well, I can start. So the first problem we address with our customers is they usually don't actually know who their target consumer is, which is a perfect use of generative AI. So we take that brand and use all publicly available information on the internet to figure out what they actually do, the products they sell, and most importantly, who the right target consumer is. And so once we know very targeted using Gen AI models who the right consumer is, then we match that to approximately 11 trillion data points a month of consumer behavior, things like that, to really pinpoint the customer. And so now you've taken this kind of relatively small business, and they are now precisely figuring out who their customer is across the US, and then streaming TV ads in the home. That's actually the easiest part of the job at that point.
So you're able to know more about the customer. I wonder, from your perspective, Chris, the data side of this, Lionsgate, as you said, has movies, shows. What should they be thinking about when it comes to leveraging their data?
That's a great question. So like films and shows and entertainment are things you go and watch, not because how they were made. You go and watch them because they're good stories. You go and watch a movie because it's a great story, not because of how it was made, right? And I think for us, it's really about that component, which is style and taste. We have great models that are able to do amazing stuff, but they're really useful when you put them with someone who knows how to use them in a creative environment that has good taste. And so if you have data that's particularly interesting from a stylistic perspective, you can think about that data as a way of teaching the model your style. And so if you're working on a 2D animated show that's very specific, or a science fiction film that also has one particular art direction, you want to make sure that your system and your tools understand that nuance. And so there's a lot of possibilities with taking that data that you have and making these models statistically much more consistent to what you want, which is what artists really want.
What about the quality? Are any of these completely AI generated, or is there always going to be some sort of human component that has sort of the subjective taste side of it?
I think there will always be like a human component in like any creative process. And look, to be honest, we've had the ability to create films with computers for many years. Like there's a term for it, it's called CGI. So we're making films with computers for a long time. This represents a new step forward in the way you can render those videos. But if you really want to make a good movie, it's not whether you have an AI model or a CGI tool, it's like whether you have a good story. And then you come on board and know how to use these tools to craft that story.
Mark, how are advertisers thinking about this? Are they looking for AI-generated content? Where do you see this going, and do they have questions about it?
Well, it's more they want more creative at a lower price point. They're
going to put their ads on AI-generated content.
Yeah. So we actually. So I'll describe that in a second. So one to finish answering the question. The average market is really busy. So if you come to them and say, "Hey, going forward, you're now going to create the ads using AI tools," it's like they're not like, "Oh, I'm excited about that." That's not the reaction you get. What they are excited about is not running, like they're trying to tell their story in a 30-second commercial, and they don't want it to be stale for 6 months or 3 months. They want more or less. So we're partnering, Mountain, we have generative AI tools, that we haven't released, but we have some commercials coming after. We're partnering with companies like Runway and others on various parts of generative AI models. So it generates the idea for the commercial, the spoken script, the actual, speaking the script, the audio, the music, and the video. And at this moment in time, the quality is kind of in that order. So the idea is great. The script is, good. The audio voiceover is pretty fair to good. When you get down to the video, that's still evolving. So we had a customer, pretty actually big brand, do a first AI commercial. They had their own video, but they had the voiceover done by AI tools. An agency quoted them 2 weeks to do the voiceover, and they did it in approximately 2 minutes in our tool.
Could you tell the difference?
No, it was a nice British accent. I was actually kind of surprised myself. I was like, this is pretty good. And so you could not tell the difference. Nice British accent. They could have dialed in a Southern accent or anything. So the technology is evolving fast. The video is definitely the hardest part. But the ideas for the commercial and the scripts are actually really good already.
You can get all the healthcare disclosures
So we think
quickly.
what's going to happen is like the young creator. My dream for this kind of environment is you're a young creator, you're 24 years old, you decide, you know what, I'm just going to go live on a beach in Tulum, and I'm going to crank these out like 3 a week and get paid $2,500 per, and
sounds pretty good.
It sounds pretty good, right? And
okay.
That's where we're headed with it, not for the marketer themselves to do it.
I'll follow up on that gig after this, because that sounds like a great setup. I wonder about IP in all of this. There was the high-profile example of OpenAI using Scarlett Johansson's likeness, allegedly. But I would think actors are thinking deeply about this, where they maybe want their likeness. We had Al Michaels in the Olympics. There's ways to use it. There's also certain lines that it feels like companies might be nervous about crossing. Maybe, Chris, you could speak to that and what it means in Hollywood.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the first thing is to recognize this is new technology, so we all need to better understand its implications and its consequences. I think most of the things we've been able to do over the last couple of years and months are things that are completely new. And so there's first a sense of well, we need to experience it, we need to understand it, we need to play with it. If you haven't generated a video, well, now's the time. If you really want to understand how this works and how what opportunities it gives you, what challenges you have, just use it. That's the first thing. And the second one, I think there's, of course, boundaries that don't necessarily change whether you're using a camera, a computer, or an AI algorithm. Those are still pretty much in there. If you want to use someone's likeness, you have to ask them for permission. That goes without saying, regardless of the tool you use. And so that, for me, is much more centered on the use cases and the applications, more than on the tools themselves.
Do you feel like companies are doing that, or are more and more companies crossing that line and sort of asking for forgiveness?
I mean, I don't know what other companies are doing. I think for us, at least, we're very much focused on making sure we work with that creative community from the get-go.
And what about you, Mark? So if you're describing this hypothetical situation where someone's on a beach in Tulum and saying, okay, make me a commercial, how do you navigate the potential, maybe copyright issues, any sort of legal drama around this?
Insurance. Seriously, like it's a pretty big opportunity right now to insure these. I mean, there are tools, like you can do the equivalent of like Shazamming the content to see if there's similar content out there. So I don't think it's totally been figured out. I do think people selling their voice, in a sense, maybe less their likeness, but their voice for something is coming pretty rapidly to kind of put a little bit more of a recognizable voice on some content with permission, with licensing fees and things like that. I'm not sure everyone's ready to put their, kind of the equivalent if they stood in front of a camera without a lot more money involved.
I'm sure the CNBC anchors are perking up, wondering, can I be on a beach in Tulum while someone else delivers the news? We'll get to some audience questions, too. This has flown by the way. But Chris, maybe we could get your take on just when, I'd love to ask about the timeline. When can we actually, will we see AI-generated content that is as good, if not better, more creative than what's out there from hundreds of years of human content?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it's already out there. I think the fact that you might not recognize aspects of how it was made is exactly the point.
Yeah.
Like, we are already, Runway and some of our tools are already using feature films and documentaries and short films and music videos. And I think what we're going to start seeing is much more of that adoption long term. From a technology research perspective, you should expect models to get much better at fidelity, at quality, and resolutions, but also more importantly, at control. Like, how do you make good movies? It's not about prompting something. There's way more aspects of making good stuff. Mm-hmm. And so over the next, I would say, 6 to 12 months, you'll see another step function, like big jump in both quality and control.
Yeah. It also, on the video side, it doesn't, like in our use case where it's a 30-second TV commercial, you don't need AI to necessarily generate the entire 30 seconds. So the brand, their stock video, they're posting on social media, on YouTube, so they have video. And so the commercials are cutting the scenes, and you might use like gen video just for 3 seconds, like someone driving down the road on a motorcycle. Where we don't actually have to put a drone in the air to go film that. That can be gen AI. So you're not gonna, I think, see someone go full 30 seconds, throw $500,000 on top of that. It's a piece of a piece of something larger.
And we are running out of time. I do want to get some questions, but regulation, last word. I don't know if you followed at all this California bill. Do you feel like there needs to be more regulation sooner? Chris, I don't know if you've had any thoughts on that.
I think it's very early to figure out exactly what kind of regulation do we need because the technology is still being developed. I like the idea of getting more people to experiment, get a good discussion, understand better the implications, the challenges, and then start thinking about it.
Mark, any thoughts on regulation?
Well, the more early regulation, the less competitive it's going to be for whatever community is doing the regulating. So probably not a good idea yet. I'm
sure there's a lot of unmined potential in terms of whether it's content, whether it's the Lionsgate example is great. Any news you can use, some advice for people who haven't necessarily incorporated Gen AI yet, and just some easy steps on how to get there?
Well, I think I was listening to the tail end of the previous talk and this talk. I think it's much more about leveling the playing field. Mm-hmm. Right, very early when ChatGPT got released, all of a sudden the emails written by my sales team seemed to get a lot better, right? So just kind of leveled the everyone, because everyone was now getting technology to write their outreach emails and things like that. So I think instead of it being viewed as kind of massive advance, the whole thing is a big advance. Mm-hmm. But in terms of the application of it, I think it's kind of taking, bringing the lowest, people investing the least and people investing the most and kind of bringing them closer together.
We'll wrap in a second. Last word on how this changes the labor force. We've talked a lot about these hypothetical jobs that are out there, but what does this mean for Hollywood and media if some of these creative jobs are going to probably go away?
The only thing I would say is technology and art and filmmaking is the history of technology. Those two things are intertwined. You can't make movies without technology. And so for me, this is an evolution of that like same premise, and you're gonna see way new jobs. A lot of new things will start popping up that just weren't visible before. A lot of other things will change. We used to have orchestras playing in theaters. We don't anymore, and for good reasons. I think this represents like another evolution of that same medium.